The food is getting more and more expensive in the world, and also the food is very valuable in terms of using resources. Today I would like to tell you how to store your goodies in your fridge the best way. What do you do so that they have their longest life possible? These tips passed to us from our grandfathers and grandmothers to the grandchildren, or from moms and dads. But now, the way we live, the houses we live in, the life that is constructed, don't give that permission to us. And usually, the stuff on the internet is very, very popular stuff, and you cannot find some really deep information when you need it. Today, I would like to give you all the range. So, if you're ready, we can start. Everything starts with the refrigerator itself. Buying your refrigerator, usually you want the biggest, the best, with all the programs, etc. But the bigger the refrigerator, the more things that we put in the refrigerator and the more things that go bad in the refrigerator. Because I start to work really, really hard, I'm always everywhere. Things in my refrigerator start to go bad more recently, so I've reduced myself. Second, buying the type of refrigerator. There are two types of refrigerators. One is no frost, the other one is static refrigerators. Statics are the ones that we have grown up with, especially if you live in a place near the sea. It's really, really humid. So the humid gets in, the refrigerator's inside is cold, especially colder at the back. The humidity sticks at the back. First it starts to precipitate and turns into water. Then the water turns into ice, and at the back some frosting starts. And usually every 4 or 5 months you have to take the plug out, let the water melt, clean all the refrigerator, take everything out. We used to do that a lot. So what they did is they created a mechanism of no frost buy. When you open the door of the refrigerator and close, some warm air gets in, and then the refrigerator starts to suck that air, take the humidity away, and give the dried air back so that there is nothing to stick at the back to precipitate and make ice. This is good in a way so that we don't have to, take the plug out every year or something. But what it also did was dry the air in the refrigerator. We are ourselves almost 70% water. All the veggies, everything has a lot of water content in them. If you put anything in the refrigerator openly, it started to get drier. So there's an advantage and there's a disadvantage. Later on in the video, I'm going to tell things where it's a disadvantage and where it's an advantage. Let's start. I think the most important thing is the fruits and vegetables. In Turkey, for example, 52% of the fruits and veggies goes to the bin. More than half of what we buy gets ruined. We have to be really careful. Some of the veggies don't need to get into the refrigerator. What are those? Potatoes, onions, garlic. These are usually the things that we know. Why would a potato don't need to be in the refrigerator? Because it has the starchiness in it, and that starch, if it goes to such a cold weather, it starts to crystallize. And when it starts to crystallize, it loses its integrity and it starts to get browner, and many things start to happen. So they shouldn't go. But also some of the vegetables also don't need to get in. Like, you'll be surprised, tomatoes. Tomatoes can be reserved in the refrigerator, but actually it tastes 10 times better if it's outside and if it's on room temperature. If you bought a lot of tomatoes and some should be in the refrigerator, okay. Same thing also for aubergines, zucchini, pumpkins as well. Everything is better outside normally. When we talk about the fruits and vegetables, I want to talk about a hormone, and it's called ethylene, and I want to tell you how it works. Ethylene is a hormone in the form of gas, and it's the only hormone that is in form of gas. It works in miracles. What it does, after the flower starts to turn to a little fruit on the tree, for example, the ethylene hormone is puffed in a way so that it helps the fruit to grow. Then the hormone that is pumped helps it to get softer and sugary and really nice taste. Then another puff goes on, separate from the stem, starts to dry, and then it will be easily fallen off the tree. Ethylene also helps to do this. Interesting thing, as the fruit is in our hands, the ethylene do not stop, continue its hormonal release. If we put, let's say, apples in a plastic bag, the ethylene starts to work, and because it's in the plastic bag and the hormone is gas cannot separate all around, it is is very dense. For example, if the apple outside would go bad in, let's say, 20 days, suddenly we can have apples going bad in 5 days. The plastic bag also increases the humidity. If it's also warm and humid means a lot of moths and a lot of things growing in. So we don't like the plastic bag and the ethylene hormone together in these cases. All the fruits should be openly in the fridge. At this point, for example, if the refrigerator is a static one, it is better for the fruits and veggies because it doesn't dry them. But the no frost ones, unfortunately, even though the trays are a bit better, dries them faster. This is how the ethylene works. But sometimes we need the ethylene hormone, and where do we need it? Unripe bananas. When the bananas are green and you want them to go better, what we do, we take a paper bag, we put the bananas in, we also put a few apples or pears or something, wrap it, and the ethylene of the apple helps the bananas to go yellow and then go sweeter. This is the advantage of ethylene. So if you want to ripe something, and it could be an avocado or it could be a banana, you can use this ethylene hormone of the ones that have a lot of ethylene, like apples, in those kind of things. When we go to avocado, if you want to ripen them, put it into a paper bag with an apple. If you want it to sit slowly, you can also put it in rice, and slowly the rice warmth, etc., will help it to mature, but in a balanced way. It happened to me a few weeks ago. A lot of avocados could come and they're all ripe. What you can do is take the avocados inside, mix it with a bit of salt and a bit of olive oil, put them in a jar, put the top of the avocado on top with a bit of olive oil to decrease the air contact, and use it like a cream. For 10 days, you can continue eating your avocado. If the avocados are not very ripe, but you want them to stay for a long time, grease paper and then some foil paper on top, let them sit in a fridge. This is usually what we do, but if they stay too long, the seed starts to separate from its skin and it's not so good. So this is a very common way of preserving it, but I don't like it more than 15 days. Many of the fruits love to be in the fridge. Bananas don't love to be in the fridge, but usually all the sweet things, because also for the flies, they are better in the fridge. But do not put vegetables and fruits mixed, because the ethylene hormone of the fruits are slightly higher. They make the veggies go bad much faster. So if you have a place, separate them as much as possible. Let's say if it's tomatoes or something, if there's one thing which is scarred, do not mix the scarred thing with the other ones, because the water of the scar, if there's water in the tray, it makes other things go bad much faster. Preserving greens also a thing. I want to tell you how you can put your greens in the fridge. You put it directly on the tray, close the tray. Secondly, you can put some water, you dip the bunch of greens in the fridge that way. Third, you can wash your greens and then you dry it somehow, either with a damp cloth or veggie dryer, either in there or in a box. You can put it with a damp cloth. 3 ways. The first way, because the fridges are no frost, takes all the water of the veggies in a day. If you put it in, let's say, on the countertop rather than the fridge, probably the countertop would work much better than the fridge. So first way is a definite no. Second way, it's really good because as the fridge takes the moisture away, it can feed from its roots. The greens don't go bad really fast, and you can take each time you need a few bunches easily that way. Still, because it's openly air, sometimes if there's something smelly in the fridge, it can soak that smell. So it's a nice way. I'm a lazy person, usually I do that. But if you are not lazy at all, the thing you have to do is the third way, which is drying and putting in the damp cloth. I made you a test for that. I did it in these 3 ways, and this is how it looks after 5 or 6 days. Some of the greens are winter greens, like coriander, lettuce, rockets. These like cold, so they are better in the fridge. But when you look at basil or purple basil, these are summery things. They like it hot. Putting them in the fridge actually makes them go bad faster. Instead of putting them in the fridge, reserve them in water on the counter. They will work much better. Fruits and veggies, mushrooms are a part of that family. The mushrooms like it always damp, a bit moist. Usually how they are sold in Turkey is they put the mushrooms and then they put a plastic wrap. That's a great way to kill mushrooms. Best way is take a paper bag, put them in and close it. This way they still keep cool and moist at the same time. as much as possible. By the way, we're gonna have another video of understanding whether, let's say, the mushrooms got bad, when to use them, when not to use them. So if you like this content and if you don't want to miss the next one, please, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. There's a bell somewhere. I don't know where they put it now. Put that bell and write a comment so that the algorithm, which is so much we have to care about these days, understand that you want to hear about us, so that it puts the content to you next time you need it. So let's move to preserving one of the most expensive things in the world, which is meat. If the meat is within bone, it has a longer refrigerator life. If it's big meat, a little shorter. If it's minced meat, even shorter. Meat don't like air, so if you're gonna put something in the refrigerator, if you put it in a plastic bag, take the most air away from it. How would you do that? Either put a straw and pull the air. This is one way. Secondly, if there's a cup of water somewhere, put it in so the water is gonna pressurize from everywhere and take the air away, and then when you close it, it's gonna be more like vacuumed. Thirdly is the vacuum container ones. They used to be really expensive, not so much anymore. If you take the extra air out, they stay really good for a long time. Then you can also put it into the fridge. When you're putting in, please write the dates on top so that you'll understand how long it's gonna be there. Now I want to talk about something that you might say, no, this shouldn't be right. But please listen to it. This is from academic papers. There's this understanding of if you freeze the meat and if you defrost it, you cannot freeze it again idea. This is actually not so true. Normally, in everything in the world, in the solid form, it's usually smaller than the liquid form. But this is not true for water. Because of water's chemistry, when the water becomes solid, which is the frozen one, it starts to get bigger. For example, because the water gets frozen in the meat, it cracks the cells, it kind of ruins the meat a bit. So when you freeze the meat and then use it, usually that meat, when you cook it, it's a bit drier, and this is the reason. When you defrost it and then freeze it again, it becomes even more dry. But it doesn't mean that the meat has gone bad. The thing about this is, let's say, meat can stay in your refrigerator for 10 days. You can put it in the freezer the next day or the same day, and then it can stay very well in the fridge for 6 months. But at some point, let's say the electricity goes away and then it starts to defrost a bit. It doesn't mean that you have to throw the meat away. It can freeze again. The important thing is how long it stays unfrozen. To understand this, there could be a nice test. A little glass of water, freeze it, and then put a coin on top. Let's say if it's a summer house or something, the ice melts and it turns out to be butter, it goes down. If the coin is totally down, it means it's totally defrosted, and then we don't know how long, so don't use that meat. But if it's a bit barely went down, it doesn't mean it has gone bad. So these are the things that you should keep in mind. For example, I got some meat, I threw it in the fridge, and then you guys were coming, so I took it out. Then you decided and said, oh, Refika, I cannot come this weekend, so it was out in the refrigerator for a day. I can put it back to the fridge again. It won't go bad, but it will be a drier meat when I make it again. And I also made the test for you, how much it loses water. I got 300 grams of meat, divided into 100 grams, directly cooked, went to the fridge, and then defrosted and cooked, and then defrosted, went to the fridge again, then cooked again. The amount of water that it loses in the article, it's written 125% of the water is lost, and then 26%, only 1% more lost to the second frozen food. Also, when you put the things in your fridge, the amount of time it takes for the fridge to freeze it, if it's longer, the amount of time it can stay in the fridge is less. Let's say meat can stay in the fridge for a year or 6 months. It depends on the degree, so I don't want to get into that. You can find some information on the internet, but I believe those are really round up ones, and I wouldn't trust it. I would trust to my eyes and taste buds. I'm going to have another video of how can you understand one thing when it goes bad. If you haven't subscribed, again, please subscribe. When it comes to the chicken, same rules apply. One thing, you shouldn't wash the chicken because then the risk of salmonella really increases. It's better to preserve it on its own bag. If you want to distribute it, you can distribute it in plastic bags and use it that way. I wouldn't suggest defrosted and again frozen chicken because when chicken goes bad, it goes bad much faster. It will ruin you in other ways that is really hard. So the meat that you have to be really careful is definitely the chicken. When we move to the fish is different from the meat and the chicken. Why? Because meat and chicken live in the surrounding. Their degrees is very much like us. So when they are in the refrigerator, they are fine. But when you go to a fish market, what you see is ice everywhere. Preserving fish, you want to preserve it in a colder place. Even though you're putting the fish in your refrigerator, put some ice, maybe a bit of water at the bottom, and put the fish inside that way instead of the plastic bag that they give it to you. This way, the fish will stay fresher longer because the fish goes in the water in a much colder way, also wants a much colder surrounding to still keep fresh. Same thing also when it goes to the fridge. Put it in a preserved way on top of an ice, let it get frozen that way. Then you can also put it into a plastic bag and then zip it. But while it's freezing, it's better if it's on the ice. For the smaller fish and meatballs, same thing, fish, meatballs. What I do if I'm not gonna use the bones, I take usually the bones out of the small fish, put the fish one by one. Once they are frozen, you can put it in a Ziploc and take whenever you need it, or you can cut the fish, put it in like meatballs, put it in the Ziploc like that as well. But when you put the meat on top of each other and they get frozen, they get stuck because there is the water and then it's hard to break it, so don't do that, keep in mind. Dairy products, we have sujuk, pastrami's and all kind of different things. They are really good if you wrap it into baking paper because we want the air to get in, but we don't want direct air contact. So if it's, let's say, fume chicken, wrap it in that paper and then have a vacuum container, put it and preserve it that way. If it's, let's say, a sujuk where the preserve is its outside skin, which is intestines actually, that's again the best way to preserve. Take the meat out, close the intestines on the part and then put it in a vacuum seal. Don't put a lot of stretch film around because the stretch film cuts its air circulation and a bit of circulation is needed. Otherwise, it gives it moist. It gives place for the molds to develop. When we say eggs, the first place that you remember and you probably will be proud of is putting the eggs in the door of the fridge because it's the warmest place. But what happens each time you open the fridge, the eggs start to shake and we don't want that. Actually, the warmest place in the fridge is the upper rack. Put your eggs, preferably don't buy eggs on a plastic container, buy in a recycled one and a recyclable storage and put it not in the door but in the top rack. And also don't wash your eggs because eggs have 17,000 pores around, and if it's like, let's say, some dirt around the organic eggs, you wash it and you let every pore get a share of that dirt and slowly it will get inside the egg and we don't like that. Another way, how you put the egg. Don't put the egg thick side down and thin side up. It should be the opposite. Why? You know, the egg has this cordon. The children have their cordon. The egg yolk has a cordon that holds the egg in the middle. When you put it the thin side up, then for the cordon to hold it for a long time becomes harder. So it has to be always the big side up. Don't think about it as a Ferrari car where the thick side should be at the back. Don't do that. It has to be on the top. The cheese. There are actually, when you divide it, 2-3 types of different cheese. One is really aged cheese, like Parmesan cheese, Pecorinos. These are really aged nice cheese. The other one is Turkish white cheese, like feta cheese, or some really fresh cheese like mozzarella. These are in a brine, and some different types of cheese which are also in brine. Brine is a great way to preserve itself, but these are fresher cheese. So fresher cheese go bad much faster, whereas the aged cheese go bad in a longer time. But when the aged cheese go bad, it could turn into red, it can have some mold. The danger of that is much higher higher than what happens to the fresh cheese. Going bad and when it happens is another video subject. I'm going to tell it later on in the series, but know that the aged cheese, if they go bad, you have to really take better care of them. Cheese do not need a lot of cold weather in the fridge. Cheese, they are okay in 15 to 17 degrees. They can be preserved in a rack in the door. Do not wrap them in a plastic cover or a stretch film because they kind of urinate. They give away some kind of ammoniac. Ammoniac, if it's kept inside the cheese, it lets the cheese go bad much faster. Instead of a plastic wrap or a stretch film, you should wrap it in a baking paper or wax paper. It's better because it has this air circulation, but in a limited way. And put it in a vacuum container, and that's the best way to preserve the cheese. The fresh cheese, they are better in brine. If you don't have a brine, but if you made your own cheese and you want them to stay preserved, 50% of salted water, you can make your own brine and put your cheese in, and they will stay much longer. Milk looks like one thing, but actually the UHT milks and pasteurized milk or the fresh milk, they work differently. UHT milks, actually, when you buy, they don't have to be in the refrigerator. You can keep them in a cool place until you want to use them. When you open them up, then they have to go to the refrigerator. The best way to preserve them for a longer time is to cut their relationship with air as much as possible. And to do that, you use, let's say, half of the milk, take the air out, and then close the lid that way. Always close the lid properly because milk sucks everything around really fast, the smells, and it might spoil faster. Especially the pasteurized and the fresh milk needs coldness. The coldest place in the fridge would be the middle rack at the back. So put your bottles, preferably glass bottles, in the middle at the back of the fridge as much as possible. Because it's the colder, it will take longer to spoil. And when it spoils, there are also other ways to save them. I'm going to tell it in the next video. Butter is actually 15 to 18% milk. The fats, the oils normally do not go bad. Actually, it's a way of preserving. That's why the olive oil or other types of oils don't go bad really fast. Maybe sometimes takes years, sometimes ages to go bad. But it's not same for butter. In the old days when we made butter, we had a preserve method called making a clarified butter, which is taking the milk out of the butter. This way, you can even preserve the butter outside in the room temperature. How do we do that? Put the butter in, let it simmer. There's a foam on the top. There's also some milk at the bottom. You take the foam out, make it clear, slowly put the butter in a jar and take the milk in. You can use that milk foam and the milk at the bottom with a bit of butter in your soups. It won't go bad 3-4 days. You can use it in that, and then the clarified butter will be with you for ages. But what happens is, you know that beautiful taste when a butter gets browned? We have that caramelized taste, incredible taste. As you can see, my eyes start to salivate. The clarified butter do not give you that opportunity. It will be a blunt taste of butter. It won't be as tasty as that other butter, so keep in mind. But it's a way to preserve. The best way for the butter to not to go bad is its own paper round, which is like a wax paper with a tin foil around. This makes it easier to wrap. It lets the air in but doesn't have a lot of air getting in. There are butter trays in Turkey, probably same in America, same in Europe. If you have those butter trays, you take it out, let's say have a family breakfast, it gets really warm, even starts to melt a bit, and then have a lot of air contact, and then goes back to the fridge. This goes back and forth, and it will ruin the butter sooner than we can even think about. So I'm not a huge fan of those. If you're gonna use in small batches. If you have a big butter came from somewhere, kiss that person, because butter is now so expensive. Cut them in portions, put it in a plastic bag, write the date, put it in the freezer. Each time you want to use, take it out. It doesn't go bad at all. I have a Turkish saying which I like. I will try to translate it. ChatGPT, sana bir çeviri sormak istiyorum. Asil azmaz, bal kokmaz. Kokarsa yağ kokar, onun da aslı ayrandır. Bunu hadi çevir bakalım.
A noble person doesn't act without measure, nor does honey stink. If there's a smell, it's of oil, whose true origin is buttermilk.
Teşekkürler ChatGPT. Thank you. Okay, from what I understand, the noble doesn't get temperate and the honey doesn't stink. If something is gonna stink, the butter is gonna stink because the origin of butter is ayran, which is yogurt and a bit of water. Now that's a culture shock. What it actually means is butter because it has a lot of milk content. To take the butter out, we make it into an ayran form, which is a lot of water and milk. It's called the buttermilk in the world, but we call that ayran in Turkey. But it's not the ayran that we drink. That's another story. Anyways, so moving into tomato paste, pepper paste, and other kind of like sauces like pesto. When they are closed and with lid, they don't need the refrigerator. They are in the room temperature. Once you open their lid, then you have to keep them in the fridge. And what you first have to do, take the spoon. The spoon should be clean each time. Make a flat surface, clean around the jars. Air contact is the thing that makes it go bad. So with a bit of oil, cut the air contact. They don't have to be really cold, so they can be kept in the door or somewhere warm in the fridge. If you take anything with a dirty spoon from these sauces, you'll know that there are other things getting in to make them go bad, so don't do that. And also, some of these sauces are sold in plastic containers. There's something called the migration. Plastic migration is the plastic goes to the food goes to the plastic goes red. This means a lot, says a lot. We cannot see the plastic on the food, but there is always a migration. The quality of the plastic varies from how much migration is gonna go. Some drinks, like the fizzy ones especially, the same rule applies, taking the air out and closing the lid. Some sauces are better in the fridge, some sauces are outside. Things that we preserve outside is our next video subject. The other next one is gonna be how do we understand whether it's got bad. That's it. I know it was a long one. Thank you for your patience if you have watched until here. I want to thank you so much. You guys are my chosen family. I have finished my book. I was like dizzy for 4 years almost. Maybe I wasn't able to put my 100% care to you guys. Now it's time to come back. So anything you want, tell me. I'll have more time, more focus on doing things and delivering videos. If you want other new stuff, please write them down. Lots of love.